Hello everyone, welcome back. We're still talking about the development of face, nose and palate, and now we'll talk about the development of palate. This section has been divided into three components. The first component will deal with the primary palate. We'll see what a primary palate is and how it is developed. In the second section, we'll talk about the formation of secondary palate. We'll see what is the importance of the formation of secondary palate and how exactly the secondary palate is formed. And finally, we'll see what is a permanent palate and how it is developed in the human adults. So moving on, we have the development of the palate. So palate is divided into developmentally into a primary palate, which develops from the frontonasal process. We talked about it before. The intermaxillary segment forms the intermaxillary segment, which is formed by the fusion of the medial nasal process of the frontonasal process and the maxillary processes. It forms three components: the labial component, which forms the philtrum of the upper lip, the alveolar component, which carries the incisors, and the premaxilla, which forms the palatal component. This premaxilla and the alveolar component together are known as the primary palate, and they develop from the frontonasal process. The secondary palate develops from the maxillary process. We'll see how that happens. So in the figure, this is the soft palate and this is the hard palate. So we'll see what a hard palate is, what the soft palate is in a little detail. So now the development of the primary palate. So this is the intermaxillary segment that is formed by the fusion of the two medial nasal processes of the frontonasal process. They form a wedge-shaped mass. This is the wedge-shaped mass of mesenchyme, which lies opposite to the upper jaw and carries the four incisors. This area is known as the primary palate. So this is the primary palate, the premaxilla, and the area containing the upper four incisors. So how does the secondary palate develop? We have established that the secondary palate develops from the maxillary fusion of the two palatine shelves of the inner aspect of the maxillary process. So these are the maxillary process. This is the nasal cavity, the nasal septum. So the fusion of the upper process of two maxillary processes, the palatine shells. These are the palatine shells, which are horizontal thickenings of mesenchyme originating from the maxillary process. The fusion of them in the midline forms the secondary palate. The palatal shells, they appear in the 6th week of development. So 6th week of development starts, and the palatal shells, they appear as swellings from the maxillary process. They initially go downward and medially. So initially they're growing downward and medially on each side of and below the tongue. So they lie on each side of the tongue and they're growing medially, that is towards each other, as well as downwards. So later they assume a horizontal position above the tongue and fuse with each other to form the secondary palate. Here you can see they are assuming a horizontal position and fuse with each other to form the secondary palate. So the ossification extends from maxillary and palatine bones into these shelves to form the hard palate. So the ossification extends from the maxilla. It starts from the maxilla and the palatine bone and extends into this to form the hard palate. However, the posterior part of this process, it fails to ossify, and they forms the soft palate or the uvula. So the anterior 2/3 they undergo ossification to form the hard palate. However, the posterior 1/3 it does not ossify and forms a soft palate as well as the uvula. So anteriorly, the plate fuses with the primary palate by a Y-shaped suture. So here you can see this is the hard palate in yellow, which has undergone ossification. This is the soft palate that does not contain any ossification. This is the uvula. This as a whole is known as the secondary palate, which is formed by the maxillary process, and the frontonasal process forms the primitive palate. The union between the primary and the secondary palate is by a Y-shaped suture. So a Y-shaped suture is formed. Now each limb of the Y, it passes between the lateral incisor and the canine. So the lateral incisor lies here and the canine lies here. So the lateral incisor lies medial to the limb of Y, and the canine lies lateral to the limb of the Y. The junction between the primary and the secondary palates is marked by incisive fossa in the adults. Now, the nasal septum also grows downwards and joins the superior aspect of the anterior 3/4 of the hard palate. We've seen that in a figure before there. So the nasal septum is also growing downwards and it fuses with the palatine shelves. So the fusion of a nasal septum results in the development of a downgrowth from the frontonasal process. This fusion begins anteriorly during the 9th week and it proceeds till the 12th week. So the fusion that started anteriorly due to a fusion of the frontonasal septum with the palatine shelves, it began in the 9th week and proceeded till the 12th week of development. As a result, the anterior 3/4 of the permanent palate now ossifies in membrane and forms the hard palate. So this portion, the anterior 2/3, it undergoes ossification, and the ossification is aided by the frontonasal process. Now, to summarize all of it, we have the hard palate, the portion of the hard palate that lies in front of the incisive fossa, that is the primary palate, which carries the 4 incisors. It is formed by the fusion of medial nasal processes of the frontonasal process. Now, behind the incisive fossa, it is formed by the fusion of the palatine shells of the maxillary processes of the 2 sides. Now, the soft palate, the unossified part of the fused palatine shells of the 2 maxillary processes, which extends posteriorly beyond the nasal septum. So, till the point of the nasal septum, we have ossification, and hence it marks the hard palate. Beyond the nasal septum, we have the soft palate. So this was all about this section. In this section, we talked about the development of the palate. We saw what hard palate was, what soft palate was, what were the how they combined to form the secondary palate. We saw how the development of primary palate went on. We saw how the fusion between primary and the secondary palate developed, and what was the role of the development of the frontonasal septum and ossification of the palate. I hope you understood this section. For further such sections, keep watching sqadia.com.